Cameras don't lie, but they sure know how to make the truth look uglier than a bad wig at a reality TV reunion. Tonight, we're talking about the footage that the internet swears is too crazy to be real. But trust me, it's real, and it's nastier than your uncle's Facebook conspiracy posts. Picture this: Atlanta, midnight. A rising rapper with dreams bigger than his bank account, a girlfriend straight out of reality TV royalty, and a brother who clearly skipped the conflict resolution chapter in the family handbook. And boom, the night ends with a rapper face down on the carpet and a family dynasty drowning in hashtags, TikTok think pieces, and Instagram detectives working overtime. But here's the kicker: was this self-defense, cold-blooded murder, or just another episode of Love and Hip Hop that VH1 was too scared to air? Because depending on who you ask, T-Hood was either the monster behind closed doors or the victim of the Frost family's deadliest plot twist yet. So buckle up, because in the next few minutes we're diving into leaked footage, shady receipts, messy demise, and a scandal so chaotic Jerry Springer himself would rise from the grave and say, "Nah, I'm sitting this one out." Atlanta has always been known for producing stars who thrive on chaos. But no one could have predicted that one of its underground voices would end up at the center of a scandal so messy it makes every past Love and Hip Hop fight look like a Sunday picnic, because what we have here is not just an argument gone wrong, but a full-blown storm of betrayal, family ties, and a gunshot that silenced a man who thought his demons were finally behind him. And at the heart of this circus is Kevin, who'd better known as T-Hood, a rapper slowly clawing his way up the ranks with tracks that felt like raw diaries of survival. The type of music that did not need glitzy production, because his raspy storytelling made listeners feel like they were riding shotguns through Atlanta's darkest corners. And for years, he was the guy people whispered about. It's the one who would break through if only he could stay out of trouble long enough to keep his head above water. But trouble had a habit of sticking to him like sweat on a Georgia summer night. And trouble is exactly what he found when he started dating none other than Kelsey Frost, daughter of Kirk and Rashida Frost. Two names that for hip-hop fans ring louder than most politicians, because they turn their family dysfunction into primetime entertainment, teaching viewers how to argue on camera with just enough tears to guarantee another season renewal. And while fans thought the Frost dynasty had settled into semi-normal life after Kirk's endless cheating scandals and Rashida's exhausted sighs became memes, it turned out the kids were just warming up to carry on the family tradition of disaster in the spotlight. Now, Kelsey was no stranger to the scene. Beautiful, well-connected, the kind of girl who could walk into a studio session and instantly shift the energy. But behind the curated Instagram smiles, there were whispers, messy whispers, about her and T-Hood clashing, fighting, breaking up, making up. A cycle so toxic their friends started joking it needed its own spin-off. But what no one was laughing at was how quickly those jokes turned into police reports, bruises, frantic calls to family members, and late-night rants that never made it onto television but leaked like wildfire onto group chats and eventually social media. And then there was Kai Frost, her brother, the protective sibling who grew up in the shadow of his parents' messy empire. A young man who never quite seemed comfortable with his family's fame, but who was suddenly shoved into the spotlight in the worst way possible when on the night of August 8th he became the man with the gun. The man whose name the internet would plaster across trending tabs within minutes. And the man who now has to live with the question of whether he acted to save his sister or to write the bloodiest chapter in the Frost family story yet. Witnesses say it was just another fight. Voices raised, doors slamming. T-Hood pacing like a man possessed, Kelsey crying in the corner, and Kai stepping in to play referee. Except this was not a game, and no one left with a trophy, because one gunshot later the room went silent, and a rapper who had been fighting for recognition was lying in his own blood. While his girlfriend screamed his name and her brother froze, realizing the kind of decision you cannot rewind with an apology. Police would later call it a domestic dispute spiraled out of control. Neighbors would call it a nightmare they could hear through the walls. And the internet would call it everything from self-defense to cold-blooded murder, sparking the kind of digital war zone that only exists when tragedy meets celebrity because everyone suddenly becomes a lawyer, a detective, and a moral philosopher armed with shaky footage and screenshots. And this is where the scandal begins to take on a life of its own, because within hours, leaked clips appeared online. Footage allegedly showing T. Hood shoving, yelling, and leaving Kelsey with visible bruises. And just like that, half the internet crowned him the villain, while the other half swore it was all a setup stage to justify what Kai did. And if you think that sounds dramatic, you have not seen the comment sections filled with fans screaming "Justice for Hood," while others wrote "Protect Kelsey at all costs," with hashtags multiplying like wildfire, drowning out any chance of calm discussion. Because the court of public opinion does not wait for trial dates or evidence, it thrives on speed and chaos. To make things even spicier, so-called insiders began dropping tea online, claiming that T. Hood had been spiraling in recent months, dabbling in drugs that turned him paranoid, aggressive, and unpredictable, with baby mamas allegedly confirming he was not the same man he used to be. And while some swore this was the tragic truth, others accused these sources of being paid mouthpieces for the Frost family, trying to protect their own. Because, let us be real, a family brand built on reality TV drama cannot afford a murder rap to destroy their image, so every angle had to be spun. Every leak had to be controlled, and every tear had to be broadcast at the right moment. The result was a perfect storm: a young rapper dead, a famous family torn apart, and a public that could not look away no matter how disturbing the footage became. Because deep down, audiences are addicted to watching celebrity lives implode. And nothing says implosion like a gunshot fired in an Atlanta apartment, turning a rising artist's future into a headline dripping with shock, betrayal, and unanswered questions. The silence after that single shot did not last long, because almost instantly the scene transformed into a circus of flashing lights, screaming voices, and frantic phone calls as neighbors spilled out into the hallway trying to make sense of what they had just heard, and while officers rushed in with body cams recording every second, the Frost family name was already being tossed into the storm of social media chaos, where fact and rumor blended together faster than a DJ mixing beats at a crowded club. And what the cameras showed was not a cold-blooded killer, but a trembling young man clutching his head, repeating that he did not mean it. His sister hysterical on the floor, trying to wake a man who was already gone. And yet no amount of raw footage could stop the tidal wave of judgment that poured online, because once the internet smells blood, it demands answers immediately. And patience is the one thing it has never had. Within hours, blogs were spinning the narrative, some calling Kai a hero who finally put an end 2 months of abuse, while others labeled him a murderer with connections powerful enough to spin the police report in his favor. And in between those extremes came the receipts. Those messy text messages Kelsey had allegedly sent to friends begging for help, screenshots that showed bruises on her arms, frantic words about him trying to slash her tires, words that painted the picture of a woman trapped in a cycle she could not escape. But then, just as quickly, came counter receipts from T. Hood's own family, who swore those images were staged, that the Frosts were manufacturing evidence to cover their tracks, even claiming he was walking away when the trigger was pulled, which, if true, would turn the whole case from self-defense to execution. The beauty and curse of this age of viral information is that nobody waits for court documents or sworn testimony when they have Instagram stories and Twitter threads. So one moment the hashtag Justice for Hood was trending, and the next it was Protect Kelsey, and every side came armed with grainy videos, shaky testimonies, and anonymous sources that may or may not have been real but were dramatic enough to keep the story alive. Suddenly, so-called friends of both sides popped up on live streams, claiming they had seen everything, describing wild nights of drugs, paranoia, arguments that lasted till sunrise, Tales that sounded more like rejected love and hip-hop scripts than real life, and yet viewers ate them up because the messier the details, the more believable they felt, even if none of it could be verified. It did not help that T. Hood himself had built an image of raw aggression in his music, lyrics about surviving the streets and never backing down. So for many, it was easy to believe he had snapped behind closed doors, but his closest allies painted a different picture, describing him as intense but loyal. A man chasing his dream of breaking out of the underground without letting the fame change him. A man who did not deserve to be gunned down by the family of the woman he loved. And while fans argued over the truth, the police played it safe, announcing only that Kai was the suspect but holding off on charges as they combed through evidence. A move that only fueled more outrage because, to some, it meant he was being protected by the Frost name, while to others it meant the cops were giving him time to prove it was self-defense. And in the meantime, speculation grew like wildfire. Was there a deeper setup, some whispered conspiracy that this was all planned from the start to remove T. Hood from Kelsey's life once and for all? Or was it really just one heated moment where a brother let fear and adrenaline guide his finger on the trigger? The internet could not decide, and maybe that was the point. Because as the story spiraled, every detail was magnified into entertainment. Every leaked message became breaking news, and every tearful reaction was replayed until the lines between tragedy and spectacle blurred into one long viral moment. And yet beneath the noise there was a chilling truth no one could ignore. That a young rapper's life had ended, not in a drive-by, not in a gang war, not in some random robbery, but in the living room of a family apartment with a gun held by someone who should have been an ally. A death so personal it cut deeper than any headline. And for those who had rooted for T. Hood's rise, it felt like the cruelest twist of all. As the dust settled and the sirens faded, the real battle began, not in the streets but in courtrooms and comment sections, where narratives were fought over with the kind of intensity usually reserved for presidential campaigns. Because this was no longer just about one gunshot, it had become a full-blown cultural event with fans, bloggers, celebrities, and even politicians weighing in on what it all meant for fame, family, and the fragile boundary between love and violence. And while prosecutors quietly debated whether to charge Kai with manslaughter or self-defense, the Frost family was already moving into damage control mode, appearing in carefully staged photos, issuing vague statements about healing and privacy, and dropping just enough tears in interviews to remind the public of their humanity while never addressing the gaping hole left by the man who would never get to tell his side of the story. Meanwhile, T. Hood's crew launched their own campaign, painting him as a misunderstood artist, silenced too, soon releasing unreleased tracks as memorial tributes and accusing the Frosts of covering up the truth with money and connections, even leaking what they claimed was security footage showing the moments before the shooting, though critics argued it was doctored. But the damage was done because every new clip, every new leak added fuel to the fire, keeping his name alive in a way that albums alone never could, and proving once again that death in the entertainment industry often brings more fame than life ever did. The fallout spread fast as streaming numbers for his songs exploded, climbing charts he had only dreamed of in life, while hashtags demanding justice competed with playlists celebrating his legacy, a bittersweet irony that turned the tragedy into both a cultural moment and a business opportunity. And just like that, brands who had once ignored him now scrambled to release limited edition merch, capitalizing on his death in ways that made some fans sick, while others lined up to buy. Because morality always bends when profit calls. And while the public devoured every twist, the legal system moved at its usual slow crawl, summoning witnesses, collecting ballistics, and debating the murky line between protecting your sister and pulling the trigger too fast. And in that gap between action and judgment, conspiracy theories thrived, some claiming the gun had been planted, others whispering that Kai was just the fall guy for a bigger plan. And a darker corner of the internet even suggested the entire scene was staged, as part of a reality show plot gone wrong, pointing to the family's history of manufactured drama as proof that nothing around them could be trusted. Whether or not any of these theories held water did not matter, because perception became reality and the Frosts were left facing the harshest spotlight of their careers. Not as entertainers, but as potential villains in a tragedy that no amount of editing could soften. And still the questions piled up like bodies in a crime drama. Who really pulled the strings that night? Why did tensions boil so high? And how much of what the world was being shown was real versus carefully crafted distraction? Because every player involved had something to gain and something to lose, and that made the truth feel slippery. Elusive, almost impossible to hold on to. In the midst of it all, fans began demanding accountability not just from the family but from the culture itself, pointing out how the glorification of toxic relationships and violent reputations had set the stage for exactly this kind of implosion. And while some dismissed those critiques as moral panic, others agreed that this was the inevitable outcome of a world where clout mattered more than stability, where every argument could be turned into content and every tear into views. Yet, despite the heavy moral lessons being tossed around online, one reality remained unshaken. A man was dead, his music silenced, his dreams buried. And his family left with more questions than answers, while the Frosts wrestled with their own demons under a spotlight they could not escape. And as the first court date loomed, the suspense only grew with reporters camped outside, fans screaming for justice, and influencers counting down like it was the Super Bowl. Because in today's world, tragedy does not just play out, it streams, it trends, it monetizes. And for better or worse, that is exactly what happened to the story of T. Hood. A tale that began as underground rap ambition and ended in a headline drenched in blood and speculation. And now here we are standing at the edge of a story that feels less like reality and more like a twisted script designed to shock, entertain, and divide. But unlike the shows the Frost family built their empire on, this one has no producers to yell cut and no editors to clean up the mess because a young man's life is gone. A family is shattered. The world is left to argue about who is guilty and who is innocent while the truth drowns beneath the noise. But I have to ask you, the viewers who have stayed locked in through every detail, what do you believe really happened that night? Was it cold-blooded rage? Was it a desperate act of protection? Or was it something far darker that none of us are being allowed to see? And how far are you willing to trust the stories being pushed in front of you? Drop your theories in the comments. Tell me whose side you are on. And let's rip open the conversation the mainstream media refuses to touch. And if you want more unfiltered breakdowns like this, make sure to hit subscribe, smash that like button, and stay tuned.